Welcome back everybody. Today we're going to learn about histograms in R. We previously touched on this in the previous tutorial. I'm just going to expand on that slightly. So first of all, what we need to do is to use the data visualization functions in R is import the ggplot2 library. I'm going to run that line. If you see what I did there, I ran that line. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use, our data set is going to be the ggplot2 movies. We might have to install this first of all. So go to packages. This is just a test data set that you can use. You could also use the core R data sets by using the data function. But for now we're going to use the ggplot2 movies data frame. So I've got the install packages option open. I clicked on install there. What I'm going to import is ggplot2 movies. Install. You'll see that it starts to run in the console window. This little stop button appears there. You'll see how much has been downloaded. When it's been successfully unpacked, you'll get this message here. So it's been successful. So now what we're going to do is import that package into our project. 2 movies. Okay, so from that we're going to create a histogram. Firstly, when we're using ggplot2, we need to create what's known as the, if you can remember the grammar of graphics as indicated or displayed previously in the previous lecture, we're going to create a data and aesthetics layer. So I'm going to call the variable for now, just until we get used to it, data and AES layer, which means data and aesthetics layer. We're going to use the function ggplot, which is the one that we use. It's native to ggplot2 to create graphs. We're going to refer to, we've not actually set this, sorry, I'm skipping a step. I'm going to call my data movies, and I'm going to cast it or coerce it as a data frame. ggplot2 movies. Have I run that line? Okay. Okay, so what I've done here is create a movies data frame. As you can see, there's 58,788 observations and there's 24 variables or 24 columns in there. I wanted to just look at the structure of my movies. I could do that. It just shows you what kind of fields I've got stored in there. For the histogram though, getting back to the point, we're going to use this data here. So movies, this is the data. We're going to set the aesthetics layer on the x-axis equal to the movies, and then we're going to use the rating. So let's run that line. That sets the information as a value in memory. So we've set up the data and aesthetics layer essentially. Now what we need to do is add a geometry layer to that. So we will use the original variable we've just created, data and AES layer, and then we're going to add to it a geometry of histogram. We're not going to pass anything inside these curly braces for now, parentheses should I say, but when I run this line, R now knows that actually I've got to display that into the plots window as a geometry, and I'll plot it on a histogram. That's similar to what we've seen previously. It looks a damn sight neater than the native histogram functionality within R, but we can improve on that somewhat. Say now that I wanted to amend parts of the geometry in the chart, I can then enter inside this some useful options or parameters that can change the display of it. So we could say color equals, let's just red for now, and fill equals blue. So when I run that again, all I've had to do there is change the geometry layer. I've not had to touch how the data and the aesthetics layer is set up. That's already predefined in this variable here. So in the geometry, if I run that again, it will change the presentation of my chart. Sorry about that. So now you can see we're starting to get there. We've got something that looks a bit more visually pleasing. We could change certain other colours, but if you wanted help on your geom histogram, you can also pass the parameter to the help function. So if I now run that line, histogram. So histogram and frequency polygons. So if I wanted to change some of these, like the width of the bins, I could specify that in the histogram layer. So I could go bin width equals, and I'll do 0.1 or 10%. Change that again, run that line. My package, my plot's changed again. It's narrowed the bins. If I go back to the help screen, I can specify the number of bins. I can specify the centre of the bins, the boundaries, etc. I'd advocate you explore certain options, but I'll take you through a few of those in the next couple of steps, essentially. The power of actually saving it in variables is I can then add, instead of having a geometry layer here, I could break this up. So if I get rid of that, I could create a variable here called geom layer. And then what I can do is I can add the data and aesthetics layer plus the geom layer, run that line. That'll give me the same result. Oops, I've not run that line. That'll give me the same result. So then I don't have to change either the data layer or the geom histogram layer. And if I make changes to either one, it's going to be replicated in this function here. I could then call this, I could then assign each one of these to a variable and call it my plot or my histogram. Because now I've set up the data and aesthetics layer, the geometry layer, I can then add a variable. So I just then have to refer to the histogram. So gram plot. And then I can just call that instead of having to call data and AS layer plus geom layer. So if I go histogram plot, I've just got to run those 3 lines again. Make sure, like, if it gives you an error, that you run the previous couple of lines, because it's obviously not been instructed to recognise certain values. So yeah, so all I have to do is call that, and it calls essentially that, and that together. So now with the plot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add labels. So xlab means the x label. I'm going to call that my rating. So if I run that just on its own, you can see that's now changed to rating. I'm going to add as well a y label. I'm going to call that probably frequency. Me again, misspelling things, ylab. So you can see frequency and rating have now been appended. If you want to add a title, you can put GG title, and then just pass a parameter to that. I could call it movie rating frequency, something like that. So if I run that again, movie rating frequency, there we go. If I then wanted to add transparency to my geometry layer, I can just extend the parameters here. So alpha is the transparency level, and say it relative to about 40%. So if I run that again, and then run these lines here, you can see it's become now more transparent. So alpha is the value that you need to set set transparency. If I wanted to change the line type, so the type of line that's separating it, I'd go back to my, again, geometry layer, and I'd add line type equal to, and it's basically graduated from 1 to 6 on a 1 to 6 scale. 1 is a solid line, 2 is kind of a dashed line, 3 is a dotted line, 4 is a mixture between a dash and a dot, a bit like Morse. 5 is a thicker dashed line, and again 6 is a thicker dashed and dotted line. So say I want line type 2. I'm going to run that all again. As you can see, it's changed the lines in between. If I wanted 6, say, and then run these, that's what 6 looks like. 3 is the dotted. Okay, so you can, like I say, adapt them to as you like. Now I'm going to focus on more advanced aesthetics options. So what I'm going to do is get rid of these options here. And what I'm going to do is inside the geometry there's also the option to set aesthetics. So we can set the aesthetics of the geometry and we can add the fill to what the fill looks like. And then this is a special command. You can add the fill of the count. I'll show you what this does in a second. So when obviously I've opened this up, so I need to close this down with the parenthesis, and then a closing parentheses to indicate closure of the histogram or the geometry layer. So with this, what it does is it adds a kind of gradient density based on the count of how many times that rating appears. So we'll run these lines here and it'll become apparent. As you can see, that's now changed and it's given me a scale here to show actually how many times these ratings occur. In the middle, obviously, we've got a lot of popular films there hanging around about 6, 7.5, etc. But yeah, that gives you a more effective visualization. Suppose I'm not happy with this choice of colours or the actual colour ramp. You can add your own choice of how that's filled based on the scale. So I'm going to, at the end of this, I'm going to get rid of all my titling for now. And then with the histogram plot, I'm going to add the scale, fill, gradient option. I'm going to link it to the count, which is there, the count field, and I'm going to set the low level, let me just break this over, I'm going to set the low level equal to, let's say green, and I'm going to have the high level equal to red. So when I run that line, it gives me a different colour scheme entirely. So it's actually easier to visualise than those graduated blue colours. You can there's completely different colours, so you can see actually where it hovers. It's the same. It's in the same area that I actually indicated, but it's easier to visualise. What I'd recommend is you use help where possible. So help on the scale fill gradient. So if I run that line, it's going to give me loads of different options. These are all inbuilt colours, grey 50. You can find lists of all the colours that are inbuilt by using the similar command to the data. It gives you loads and loads of different options. So yeah, you can indicate those through and just pick a few. So I could say fire brick 4. If I put that there as my low colour and then run again, it's going to completely change what it looks like. And then change my high colour, again, let's say white smoke. Again, completely changes the chart. So I'd advocate that you have a look at the help, so you explore the help to see what other options you can add. You can change midpoints, colours, the vector of colours, colour missing values, etc. Set the low and high, which we've already done. Essentially though, the point in statistics of a histogram is to convert continuous data into count data, or discrete data as they call it in the more statistic concepts. So you basically convert it from continuous, which can have any number of variables or any number of measurements essentially. It can go from 1 to infinite to a more of a counted discrete set of numbers, because by binning you put it into discrete set of counted intervals. Again, like I say, just refresh your knowledge on histograms if you don't know how or when to use them. There's lots of good websites out there, but this is just meant as a tutorial for R and how you then apply histograms. But what I do is advocate looking at each one of these options and going into the help system, because there are lots and lots of parameters, and this is not an exhaustive tutorial, unfortunately. Anyway guys, catch you next time. We're going to cover bar charts in the next session. See you again. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Stay tuned.